Mythology is not just a hobby. It is a map for life. I was listening to Hannah Roizen's wonderful Narcissus 9-minute remix, and my 6-year-old asked me,
"What's this song about?"
It's about Narcissus, who was a beautiful man who looked at his reflection so long he couldn't see anyone else's face at all.
Can that really happen?
And I said yes, because the pith of that story is true. If you love nobody, your self-image will drown you. And she doesn't know words like self-image, but she sat in the corner of this chair for 10 minutes thinking about that. A myth is a story that gives us a framework for understanding something that would otherwise be too big for our minds. We personify a psychological disorder so we can understand how it destroys a person and the pain it causes people around him. We find fossils in the ground. We discern a narrative that they must be part of. We see planets move across the sky. We construct a model of what we think that would look like from far away. So Narcissus, evolution, the Bible, the solar system, they're all myths. Even J.R.R. Tolkien, a devout Roman Catholic, described his faith this way: the story of Christ is simply a true myth, a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with the tremendous difference that it really happened. And this shows you the way I'm using the word myth in this essay. It is a story that orients our minds toward a better understanding of reality. Whether or not the myth is literally true is a different debate. And from the cross of ashes that is on my skull, you might guess that I have an opinion about that, and you'd be right. But that's a different video. Myths are not, as some people think, outdated science. It'd be more accurate to say science is the new myth, the new body of explanations. But what value do the old myths have? My best way to answer that is to tell you 3 myths. Come with me. So if you're Christian, you're wondering why I said the Bible is a myth. If you're atheist, you're wondering why I said myths have value. The story of Jonah answers both of those questions. Most widely disbelieved Bible story. So Jonah is a prophet, and one day the voice of God comes to him, telling him to go preach to the Ninevites. The Ninevites are an evil people, but even by ancient standards. God tells Jonah to preach that they are about to be destroyed and they can save themselves if they repent. Jonah does not want to tell them this. He wants them to be destroyed. So he gets on a ship. He goes as far away from Nineveh as he can. Out in the sea, storm blows up. It is a storm unlike any the sailors have seen, and they conclude that somebody on board has disobeyed his God. Jonah says, "It's me." They say, "What God do you serve?" He says, "The Lord who created heavens and earth." Worse news than the sailors were expecting. He says, "I'm the one who sinned. If you throw me overboard, your lives will be saved." The sailors don't want to do it. They row hard to try and get to shore, but they're unable. They finally have to throw him overboard. The storm relents, and a sea creature swallows Jonah. Big fish, big whale, monster of the deep swallows him. Now he's dead. Now he's in hell, either physically or just symbolically been swallowed by a creature of chaos, a creature of the underworld. He cries out to God not to leave his soul in hell. And this might seem like it's the worst that things can get for Jonah, but it's not, because God hears his prayer, and the fish spits him out on the beach right at Nineveh. And he has to go and proclaim the truth. Now, one thing that the story represents is that voice of conscience, the voice of God in the story. If it has come to you to give you something to say, you have to say it. Because if you flee from the discomfort of saying it, if you don't humble yourself to say what is in your heart, chaos you cannot even imagine is going to blow up around you and swallow you, maybe destroy people around you. But the way out of that chaos is to take that bitter pill, say what you have to say. And notice that is actually true, as in the world acts this way, whether or not the story is literally true in its words. That's what a myth is. The ancient Greeks had a story about where creativity comes from. It starts with a titan named Osiris and a titaness named Phoebe. Osiris and Phoebe have a daughter named Leto, and she catches the eye of Zeus and makes her pregnant with twins. But his jealous wife, Hera, forbids every land from allowing Leto to give birth. And so she has to wander the whole earth in these perpetual birth pangs. And you can start to see that this is a story about creativity. And if you've ever struggled to get a story out onto paper, or a piece of art out on the canvas, you've known Leto's birth pangs. Finally, Poseidon takes pity on her and creates a new island. It comes up from the bottom of the sea, and because it wasn't there, it's not subject to Hera's command. Leto comes to this island. She sits down under the one tree that's there, and she gives birth to Apollo and Artemis. Now, Apollo is famous for presiding over the muses. And so that's why this is a story about creativity, but also Apollo is the logical, rational, structured kind of inspiration. He's the sun. He's classical music. And Artemis is the moon. She's the chaotic, shifting, unstable kind of inspiration that leads you mysteriously along unknown paths. You can't successfully hunt for anything without Artemis, even though you don't know where she's leading you. And together, they're kind of those two styles of thinking. And Osiris's name means question, and Phoebe's name means light. Creativity starts with a question. And you'd think when question and light come together, they would birth answer, but they don't. Leto's name means oblivion. Her name's related to Lethe, the stream in the underworld that the dead drink from in order to forget their past lives. Which makes it very interesting that depression medication includes lithium. That's a strange accident. But Leto wanders in oblivion because when you ask a question and then you see into the light, there's too much light for you to have an answer. You are blinded, you are in oblivion. And you're stuck with something inside of you that you can't get out. Because structure and order in the form of Hera don't want you to birth anything new. That would disrupt things. You can't do that here. We don't ask that question in this class. You can't use finger paint here. You can't write that kind of story. You can't tell that kind of joke. That's Hera. Anytime you're trying to birth something new, there will be a rule about it. So where do you have to go? You have to go to an island where those rules don't apply. Look at how it's a tiny place with no rules. And that's not just your artist studio, it's also that once you know grammar, you're able to act like there aren't any rules, you're able to just write. Once you know how to hold a brush, once you know how to play drills on the piano, you can act like those rules don't exist and you can just create. But you have to get to that island first. Then you give birth to Apollo and Artemis, because that's the only way creativity works. They are math and mythology. They are reason and imagination. They are order and chaos. They're yin and yang. That's why he's an effeminate male and she's a boyish female. Then Apollo slays the serpent, brings the light, trains the muses to sing. And there was a ship that carried that light to Athens once while Socrates waited in prison. But that's a different video. Osiris, the ancient Egyptian god of law and order, is the king of the gods. He has great wisdom, but he is blind to the malevolence of his brother Set. The other gods warn him about it, he doesn't want to listen. Set eventually tricks Osiris and cuts him up into pieces. You can't kill him because he's a god, but distributes the pieces all around the world so that he can't put himself back together. His wife, Isis, who's the queen of the underworld, rises up, scours the whole earth looking for pieces of Osiris. She's only able to find one piece of him, but she uses it to make herself pregnant with a son, Horus. And Horus is a falcon. He's not blind. Horus does see Set's malevolence. He confronts Set, and he wins, but Set tears out one of his eyes. Horus banishes Set. It's victory for Egypt. You think he's going to put his eye back in, but he doesn't. He goes into the underworld and finds the spirit of his cut-apart father, resurrects him and gives him the eye so that now they both have vision. And they rule together. And the Egyptians believed that the Pharaoh was actually inhabited, or he was the personification of both of these gods, Osiris, who is culture and tradition, and Horus, who is vision for the future. Those two things intersect in the Pharaoh. You actually see this one over and over. In The Lion King, Mufasa is Osiris, Scar is Set. Mufasa doesn't believe how evil Scar is until Scar undoes him, and it's only the son of Mufasa with the vision who is able to overthrow Set. Osiris is the god of culture and tradition. Why is he blind? Because that's what tradition is. That's what culture is. It is a system built by the dead. It cannot see today's problems. That's why after this myth, Osiris also becomes god of the dead. He can't see the problems that we're facing now. Why is the malevolence there? It's because there is always malevolence, and it wants to cut up order. It can't actually destroy it because Osiris is structure itself. You can't get rid of structure, but you can divide and separate culture into fragments that are easier for you to tyrannize. This is why in a two-party system, the two parties rarely talk to each other productively. The forces that want to become tyrants don't want them to talk to each other. Set is the divider. So what do you need? You need the true-born son of that culture, not an outsider with brand new ideas, the son of tradition, now equipped with vision, so that he can see the malevolence and face it head on. And notice that he's wounded. You cannot face malevolence without being wounded, without being scarred by it. This is why most people don't face it. They don't stand up to make a difference. They don't say what's on their heart, like Jonah either. Jonah did not want the wound that it would take to say what was true. So Horus banishes Set because you can't kill him. Malevolence will always be there. You can only banish it for a time. And look what he makes of that wound. He turns that wound into new vision for his father, for the culture that he's inherited. He makes his culture something that now can see. He doesn't abolish his culture for something new. He gives it new vision. Imagine if political activists knew that they are walking the path of Horus. They would have guidance of what to do, what not to do, what their real goals even are. I forgot to say back there, Isis is the queen of the underworld. She represents chaos, and this is what happens when you lose order. Chaos rises up. But chaos is not the enemy. Chaos is crying out for order. It is looking for order. That's what the riots and the demonstrations are. May not be a good way of looking for order, but it is what inevitably happens when you lose structure, and we should know that. Mythology tells us what path we are on and what we need to do and what will befall if we don't. Because I am Horus and Leto and Jonah. I can't help it. But if I know that I am those people, then I know what I'm up against. And so it isn't that mythology has better answers than science. It's that mythology is answering different questions than science, and arguably more important ones. Understanding myths and literature grows us in mental health. And that is why I teach a live online course called Myths to Save the World. It's for a 2-semester world literature course for high school and adult learners, where instead of focusing on one country or time period, we actually go from ancient to medieval to modern literature and myths to give us guidance for life. Myths that give us guidance into who we are, how our minds work, how culture works, how to not be devoured by the chaos. If you want to join me for next school year, the website's in the description. If you just like mythology, come on back.